Hey YouTube, this is Zach with AchillesFinancial, and today we're going to be talking about an earnings play that we have coming up for this week in the form of Fedex Corp, or just Fedex as it's more commonly known. We're going to be looking at the ticker symbol FDX, and they are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. So let's take a look. As you can see, they've had a bit of a downward movement or motion coming over the past few days, including over the past month. They're still up. And FedEx is a company that has continued to do well, and I anticipate that they are going to continue to do well. And we're expecting a very strong earnings report. So let's get started just by going straight into the earnings announcements. As you can see, just based off of the Q1 report of this year and what we're expecting here in Q2, or rather the second Q1, is a massive increase over what they have been doing even a year ago today. And this is a company that I anticipate is going to continue to perform well, despite the fact that they've had some down days in the past few days on the actual stock. So as you can see, their earnings per share has been huge in terms of just what you can generally expect from companies in the, I don't want to say even the air freight and logistics subsector, but just the industrials in general. So this has been a really good year, and generally speaking, the last 3 months of the year is one of the stronger time periods. So what I'm really going to be looking at from their earnings announcements is not really just what we're looking at historically from the period that this past quarter covered, but rather what I'm looking at is what the expectation is going to be of the September to December time period, because that's really going to showcase a lot of the important information for them, because this is a time period where you're seeing a lot of coverage surrounding the vaccine distribution, as well as a lot of support for just e-commerce and online shopping in general. You have to remember that one of the heavyweights in that world of Amazon actually doesn't utilize FedEx, and so FedEx has actually expanded a lot more into a lot of the other e-commerce platforms, and they are doing a lot of the shipping there. So let's actually look at some of the fundamental capabilities that we're seeing here. In terms of overall stock price, as you can see that they are at basically an all-time high, although they're down over the past 5 days. And I think that presents us some really good opportunities that we'll talk about later in the video in terms of how to play the options, as well as is it worthwhile to actually buy the shares during this time period. So let's take a look at just some of the balance sheet opportunities. I really like a lot of what we're seeing over the course of this information because of two key reasons. One, they're continuing to hold cash and make strategic investments in their business over time. And I really like that about FedEx, and this is something that you can see in UPS as well. But they don't spend money just because they have it, but rather they're very strategic with that information. And we've seen that over time just in terms of their infrastructure developments, as well as their supply chain logistics. So there's a lot of pros to what they're doing across the board. So that's one of the reasons why I like this. As you can see, we haven't seen a huge increase in debt, despite the fact that they've taken on a lot of heavy workloads this calendar year. So 2020 has been a really good year for UPS and FedEx, and I think we're going to see a lot of that come out in the FedEx announcements later this week. In particular, we were just looking at some of the cash, but look at the revenue streams. In particular, the income associated with those revenue streams. So we're not seeing these massive increases in revenue, or at least we haven't this year. I anticipate we're going to see yet another jump in this upcoming announcement, as well as I'm hoping to see some of this build on the actual operating income happen. So just from an annual perspective, this is not inclusive of all of the years in terms of the operating income, but look at the total revenue growth. Again, they're growing very cleanly, and we're not seeing a lot of weak points in the overall company. Now, let's talk about, despite all these strong basis for the company, what does that actually translate to in terms of the actual stock? Well, the overall analyst report, there's a lot of buys, and you can see that comes out to basically a consensus price target of that 317 number that you see here on the screen, which shows pretty great upside. That's about 10% upside from the company now, although you can see that the high end of that of 380 would be incredible growth. You're looking at right at 25% growth from where we're at today. So there's a lot of really strong predictions as far as what the stock is going to do. However, I think what's actually going to happen is we're going to see a lot of the trend from the stock this week is going to be coming from the broader market. You can see that this is actually pretty closely following like tech industry or the broader market, even the S&P 500, with obviously some higher growth opportunities on the latter half of this year. But again, we're comparing this to essentially the whole market, and when we do that, you can see that that weakness in the market is actually what's dragging this down. We're not able to see this great over the past few days, but you can see as the markets had weakness, some of these declines right here is when you start seeing those dips in Fedex stock as well, and you saw this early December. So you can see they're kind of following the broader market, and because of that, I think that it's going to be really difficult to say that they're going to have a huge run up just based on earnings, unless we take into consideration what the overall stock market is going to be doing later this week. So the key things to watch this week are going to be anything surrounding stimulus, which again, they've been talking about this for months on months. I don't have high expectations associated with it, but again, if something positive does get sent to the floor, we see any positive commentary, then that may be beneficial. At the bare minimum, it won't be hurtful, where again, the inverse is going to be exactly that, where if we do see any negative associations with stimulus talks, that could only hurt. And the other thing that we've been seeing is a lot of profit taking. So some of the companies right now that make up the S&P 500, you've got big hedge funds that are taking some of that money, and that's something that I can anticipate is going to continue at least throughout this week and maybe next week. And depending if the stocks are at a lower level, maybe 5% down from their current prices, we could potentially see some additional gains there following that when people start buying in at those prices. So that being said, when we look at the actual stock in terms of just FedEx, we're nearly at an all-time high, definitely at the 52-week high. And you can see that we're still under where they were a few days ago in terms of that 305 level that you see here. But that being said, what does that bode for the stock? Well, a lot of the analyst upside is long-term. And I think that anything you do in terms of just holding the stock, you're going to get a good price. Anything under $300, I do think they're going to continue to grow over the next 12 months. And that's really what I am looking at here in terms of a earnings play. I don't really like the options because similar when we were looking at Zoom, similar when we were looking at Docu, we've got all these options right here in terms of how to play it, in terms of some of the capabilities. However, if you look at, we'll just look at some of the end of the week, they're expecting it to move a lot. And you can see right here that the 295 call, which is a pretty simple move, has a premium associated with it of essentially this is going to be another $950 or another $9.5 before you would even profit from that. So is there a way for that stock to move that much and you make a profit? Yes, 100%. I think there's the opportunity to do so. However, if you see something like this go through, the stock does have to move for you to make that money. And I think that's going to come with the broader market moving. Otherwise, you kind of just have to hold till the end of the week, which again, you don't have to do so. Instead, I'm going to recommend the same strategy that I did with Adobe, which is I like the idea of buying half of your shares now and buying half of your shares after the earnings play in case there's any weakness. Again, if you see any of that drop, right now the stock could have a 10% drop in price, and that would bring us to the 250, 260 levels, and I think that that's still a very healthy buy point. And you can see that there was some of that in the November time period. So I'm going to be watching it, but I think the play here really is to own shares. The options, I don't see a lot of favorable options prices, but I really like the 310 option if that's one, the 310 call, if that's one that you want to be watching. Or you could sell on any of that increased premium, and this is something that we could talk about, is you do have the capability to sell the put side. So if you want to look at some of the puts, then we actually have the capability for even just the end of the week, if you want to go down, not necessarily these 285, 282. I like to go a little bit lower than that. Let's get a little out of the money, or yeah, we'll go all. But if we actually go a little bit farther out of the money to that like 250 range that we were just looking at, kind of from that support, you're not going to get a lot of money. However, you can sell the $91, although you would need the $25,000 to collect that. But put credit spread, I think, is still going to be capable to get you some of that money. And again, you've got quite the level of resistance here. So that's how I would be looking at the option side. I personally am not going to be playing this, but this is just a few ways that you could approach it. So all that being said, if you found the content today helpful, please leave a like and subscribe, and let's keep watching Fedex. If you want to see how we're going to be looking at Fedex, how we may play that, feel free to join the Discord. That is going to be in the description below. We call out watch list. We look at plays, and there's a lot of opportunity there to just talk about stocks. So if you find any of this helpful, let me know in the comments below. Thanks. Talk to y'all later. Bye.